People who had COVID-19 or know someone who did. How bad was it? My grandmother got it. In her late 80s and in a nursing home. She probably weighs 70 pounds and can barely sit up on the best of days. She had a fever for a week and a mild cough, then recovered. We are shocked. She's so weak that when the home told us she had it, we all thought she had no chance of beating it. Weird how it can kill strong healthy people, but somehow spare her. My mom had COVID. Started as a fever then quickly worsened. Within days she was in the hospital on oxygen. Seriously thought she was going to die. My dad has COVID. He has zero symptoms and probably had it 4 days before the results. My dad is diabetic with kidney failure and multiple other health issues. Why my mother, who's mostly healthy, reacted so badly compared to my dad is uttering bewildering. 3 friends, 2 of which had families, 1 was living alone, so they all decided to live with each of the alone guys' house so their families didn't have to suffer the illness, and if one of them got badly sick the less sick guys could take care of him. They got a bad fever and a dry cough, and one of them lost his sense of taste for a little while afterwards, but they came out of it fine otherwise. 30-year-old friend had it. He was so sick that his roommates were almost afraid to check on him in his room because they thought they'd find him dead. Getting out of bed to go to the bathroom took all of his strength. He's fine now, but it took a few weeks for his lungs to feel even remotely normal. I had it. I was basically bedridden for 2 weeks, barely doing anything except sleeping. Even then, I kept waking up at night a sweaty mess. I spread it to all my family members, but they showed extremely minor symptoms. Pretty weird stuff. My friend is in Italy. He got it and was sick/bedridden for a week, while his girlfriend had just some aches. Both his parents, his grandparents and his uncle died, all within a week. Edit, to lessen the horror I will add that his aunt had it too, but recovered. Sorry, it's a rough one for a Monday. My mum went from minor tickling throat to being taken away in an ambulance by people in hazmat 3 days later unable to breathe. 2 weeks later she died. No major health issues. She was sedated as soon as she went into hospital and on a ventilator for the duration. Eventually her organs started failing and there was nothing else they could do other than turn the ventilator off and let her go. I'm 32 and it was the sickest I have ever been. 2 weeks of fever over 101, bad cough that lasted almost a month, shortness of breath where, if I walked more than a few steps I would end up doubled over gasping for air. It was pretty bad, but at least I'm all better now. Just heard this morning that a friend of mine died last night. Her partner called 911 when she took a turn for the worse, and in the time it took the EMTs to get there she'd already passed. It was that quick. She'd been tested, knew she was positive. She was told to stay at home unless her symptoms got worse. She felt sick, but not rushed to the hospital sick. Until last night. I'm trying to comfort myself knowing she'd rather die in her own bed than in a hospital surrounded by strangers. I lost my fiancé to it. And I don't know which option would have been worse. In the end I suppose it doesn't matter. I'm so sorry. My condolences to him. COVID doesn't discriminate at all. My sincerest condolences to you and Opus. So, my dad tested positive, and right now for him is just like a bad flu. Because the test results came back 3 days later, we continue to act normally as a family, so my mom and I probably have it too. We are almost 100% positive that my mom also has it because she is losing her sense of smell and has been having similar symptoms like my dad. There is a big chance I have it too, but I have not presented any symptoms so far. I hope everything will be fine for you all. My sister, who was 47 with no underlying health issues, passed away from COVID-19. It took 10 days. She was in the hospital for the last 3. The scary part is she was making a recovery. Her lungs at day 7 were operating at 83%, and after 2 days in the hospital she had got them to 95%. In 29 hours it was a complete 180. I was able to text with her. She kept saying she was having a really tough time, but didn't go into much detail. My brother-in-law and 2 nephews also had it. He mistakenly thought his COVID was just from a good gym workout, as his body was just really sore. My nephew, age 13, puked one night and had a fever for a few hours. The youngest, age 7, never had any symptoms and felt fine, all tested positive. My friend was tested positive. He is quarantined at home with a little fever, muscle pain and a light cough. He is getting better every day it seems. I've had 2 friends with it. Both with no underlying health issues, both in their early 30s. One had minor symptoms and recovered after a few weeks. The other struggled to breathe, so she went to the hospital, was put on a ventilator, then slipped into a coma and died. I'm so sorry. That's the most terrifying thing about this virus to me. It's just so random who gets hit hard. IQ nurse checking in. I just got cleared to go back to work tomorrow after testing positive a couple weeks ago. How bad was it compared to the COVID patients I've treated? Nothing. I didn't even have a fever or shortness of breath. Our IQ patients are so sick. All the things you've heard about on the news. Hypoxia. Blood clots. Multi-system organ failure. We've had many people in their 30s and 40s with no pre-existing conditions who've ended up just as sick as the 80-year-olds, and many of them haven't had good outcomes, sadly. I work at a major hospital where we routinely get the sickest patients transferred to us from smaller hospitals, so I realize I'm seeing the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, but it is scary. My symptoms were all so minor and non-specific that I blew them off or chalked them up to other things: spring allergies, dry hospital air, sleeping poorly on my shitty mattress, working overtime for several days until I realized I'd completely, profoundly lost my sense of smell and taste. That's when I knew I had to get tested. Lo and behold, it was positive. It sucked, but I'm very grateful I wasn't any sicker than I was, and especially that I have health insurance and work at a place that paid for my covered specific sick leave as well as having paid sick leave in general. I know there are so many other people out there who don't have such a safety net, and it seems very unfair. Currently in the hospital with is in my early 20s. I rode it out for a week until I could breathe. Sickest I've ever been, and never had to hospitalize before now. Going home tomorrow though, so that's good. I'm recovering now. 2 friends both lost a parent each. So pretty bad. My mom died from it, so not great. I'm a MD in New York City at a designated COVID-19 center. 15% of pregnant patients here have COVID-19. Of those positive patients, 87% are completely asymptomatic. We just admitted another one half an hour ago. She looks fine. It's good that so many don't get real sick, but it's scary because they are likely walking around spreading it. My best friend had it and was non-stop coughing with fevers to 103.6 and every flu-like symptom you could imagine for about 3 weeks with a slow recovery. Said it was horrible. Terrible cough when I was FaceTiming him. One of my co-residents had it and felt like hell for about 2 weeks. Cough, fever, body aches. 2 family friends in their 60s has it and were laid out at home for about 1.5 weeks. One was kinda stuck in bed and the other weakly supported the 2 until they improved on their own. The common thing I hear is that it's like a horrible fever that just stays and stays and stays. You keep thinking you turned the curve, but the next day you're still sick until it runs its course. The really sick patients in the hospital it was really horrible for a long time. Things have slowed down thanks to social distancing and all the precautionary measures. I'm worried about going backwards though, because the people in my area are walking around without masks or their nose out. Everybody has a reason for going out or not wearing a mask. The virus does not care what your reason is. It does not care. Edit. Thanks for the 2 cool awards. I like the scrub Reddit dude /Dudette. I've had 4 people in my life pass from it so far. Former coworker and friend was one of the first people in the US to die from it. He was 34 years old and only had childhood asthma. A great friend and collaborator I had just stayed with a month before. He was 39 years old and no pre-existing conditions. My best friend's mother, who was like a second mother to me. She was 63 years old with no pre-existing conditions. My grandmother, who was in a nursing home. She was 90 and was relatively healthy for her age. All passed within 2 weeks of showing symptoms. With the exception of my grandma, they all were home for the first week, then were admitted to the hospital as their conditions worsened.